Hello, and welcome to a podcast
A podcast.
hosted by college kids
Oh, yeah.
on a budget. My name is Jeremy Kington, and I am followed up by my good buddy.
Justin Wills.
How you doing, Justin?
Doing pretty good. We are two theater majors. We enjoy film quite a bit, especially the acting portions of it.
Indeed.
And we got to talking one night after rehearsal about how we just talked about movies for probably 2 hours.
2 hours.
Figured we might as well do something with that.
Oh, yeah.
So we were talking about it, and we decided that for our first movies to review, we might want to look at the Harry Potter franchise, as it's one of the defining cultural series of our generation, I would say.
I would agree with that because I feel like it's a lot of it's more like how Lord of the Rings was to our parents. And
That's what I was thinking
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. It's like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. For our generation, this is kind of the movie that people grew up with. And I feel like it actually spawned an even larger sort of movement towards more than just trilogies, because before this series came out, most of them were just trilogies. And now
Absolutely.
this one had, with its 8 movies, it spawned a lot more series that go on a lot longer than what we previously would have even thought would be feasible, I feel like.
Oh yeah, it's insane how long this franchise is. It's just, and now that we have a whole new franchise spawning based off of this called Fantastic Beasts. Right, yeah. And it's just insane cuz like I mean, we have 8 movies of the Harry Potter franchise, 2 of which have been split up into 2 parts. And I feel like it broke ground as far as how future movies based off of novels would handle their movie franchises like Twilight. And this can go into debate about how, do those movies deserve to have their movies split into 2 parts? Probably not. I would think that it was just purely a gimmick, and
it's one that, for better or worse, I think pretty much for the most part at least started with this series.
Oh,
or
yeah.
at least this one kind of picked up on it pretty early with its last movie.
Absolutely.
So, so without further ado, we'll be talking today about Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or Philosopher's Stone, depending on where you are.
It's all the same to us muggles.
Yeah.
All right, so this movie was directed by Chris Columbus, and this is actually the first movie of Chris Columbus that I've ever seen.
I believe I would have to agree with that. Oh, Home Alone 2, actually, and Home Alone. So,
Yeah,
actually, I've seen pretty much most of the big ones that he did before this, I would say.
I've seen quite a bit of his films. Just the Harry Potter movie was the first of his movies that I'd seen because I watched it when it first came out in theaters. I don't remember it, but I watched it.
Yeah, and he directed this one as well as the second one, The Chamber of Secrets, and it seems like those are they seem to be a little bit of outliers as far as the things that he tends to direct. He's got Home Alone 2, Mrs. Doubtfire, those kinds of movies, but at least compared to those, these are a much grander thing to take on, for sure.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
And I would not guess that he had not really done this sort of thing before, because as far as the directing in this movie went, I was pretty pleasantly surprised with it. There was nothing that seemed out of place, I would say.
Oh yeah, not at all. The direction in this movie is very, very charming. Like there's a lot of charm to it, and it's just you just can't help but get sucked into the film.
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially for like the plot that is given to us, which we'll get into in a little bit, it's insane how so much happens inside of this movie, and it's all mainly just pure setup for the future films.
And yet, at the same time, unlike so many first movies of franchises that came after it has such a well-done, self-contained story within it. And one of the things that I found most surprising, almost, about this, having seen so many movies after it, is just the fact that there are as far as I can think of, I don't think there are any loose threads really hanging at the end of the movie.
No.
There's nothing. It clearly sets up for sequels, which is something it needed to do, of course.
Yes.
But it does so in a way that is still satisfying and tells a complete story, which I feel like is something that, especially in movies and series that came after this, is something that kind of has been neglected a little bit, where they tend to want to set up more for a sequel sometimes than they actually want to make a good film to begin with.
Exactly. And I mean, this film, it leaves you wanting more. It leaves pretty much everybody that I like have talked to thus far about this film wanting more from the franchise and more from the lore and what happens to the characters and all that stuff. So yeah, do you want to we'll just dive into, well, actually, let's get a couple of production stuff out of the way first. So this film obviously was released in November of 2001, and the budget of the film was initially 125 million, and it ended up grossing, let's see, 974.8 million. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I think that warrants a sequel.
Oh yeah,
8.
or 8 for sure. A running time of 152 minutes. That's a long movie.
It was a very long movie, especially for the time, and I mean, it does come after. It definitely comes after the first Lord of the Rings. However, I feel like that movie, they both managed to pack so much runtime, but make it feel all useful and like it all needed to be there. Like,
Absolutely.
There's not really anything that I can think of that I would say should have been or needed to be cut out of this for brevity's sake. I would say pretty much everything that happens really has a reason behind it and is very meaningful, I would say.
Oh yeah. And the cinematography is done by the great John Seale, of course. John Seale is just wonderful. I mean, like, seeing movies like Dead Poets Society and like Rain Man is just... And he even did The English Patient. I haven't seen The English Patient, but my God.
And of course, the music as well was John Williams.
John Williams
is never a bad thing to tote for your movie. So.
Oh no, of course.
And one of the greatest things I would say about this franchise and what it manages to do is the fact that so many of its leads, especially in this first movie, are definitely child actors. They were, I think it was 10 or 11 when they started this process. Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, Emma Watson, the three of them especially. And it's such an interesting thing to get to see people grow up on screen alongside you, because these are people that aren't too much older than we are. They're maybe about probably 8 years older than us, somewhere like that. Yeah. And we grew up watching them grow up on screen, and it's such an organic thing that so few series get to do, because so few last this long and have this much of an impact, I would say.
Oh yeah, it's insane how, like, we get to witness the growth of the growth of these actors, not only through their acting, but just in general. Like, they're growing up, they're becoming teenagers, and they're going through what we went through. It's one of the most relatable movie series that I can think of.
Yeah, especially for our generation.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And so, all right, yeah. So we mentioned Daniel Radcliffe, who is wonderful, just such a great actor.
And what kind of things did he do? Anything before this that was notable? I don't
believe
remember.
So. I believe this was the film that put Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson both on the map. I'm not sure what else Rupert Grint has done, but
but yeah, this is, and for child actors, I would say they did a pretty good job, especially as far as child actors go, and even taking away the fact that they are child actors, while there are some parts that I would say are a little bit weak as far as acting, that's to be expected, but there's a lot of moments in here that I feel like really do well to establish these characters and to really just take them off of the page, which they really shouldn't be able to do at that age, but they take them off the page so well and they put them to film, and they managed to do it incredibly well from what I saw.
Now, this, of course, is not a perfect movie.
Of course not.
It's
No.
it's very very dated in as far as CGI goes, and that's something that we'll get into. But
All right. So do we want to start with just the plot?
yeah, let's dive into it. So we start out with meeting the characters. Albus Dumbledore, played by the late great Richard Harris. My God. We have Professor McGonagall and Rubeus Hagrid, the legendary Rubeus Hagrid, played by Robbie Coltrane. God.
And Maggie Smith as McGonagall. So we have already just three incredible actors to start off this movie.
Right off the bat.
One of the things that struck me the most is the fact that you put new child actors next to these incredible actors and actresses, and you get to see both. You would think that it would kind of overshadow the newer cast or the younger cast, because there's so much talent that is older and more mature and has had more time to develop alongside them. But throughout the films, even through this one, you see just how much that they learn from the older cast that they get to work with.
Oh yeah. So we got we've got Dumbledore, we've got McGonagall, Hagrid, all dropping off the very young Harry Potter as a baby.
And I would say that the atmosphere of the first scene is fantastic. It really works to set up the darker undertones of it while still being sort of silly. Like the thing with the light, the special effect has not quite aged great, and it's a little bit obtuse with how long it takes for him to one by one suck up the lamp lights. But to be fair, with the lamp lights there, it wouldn't have been as cool. So
right.
I mean, maybe we could have seen that, maybe the tail end of that, and maybe not the entire process. But
all right, and then we see Dumbledore taking young Harry Potter, putting him on the doorstep of the Dursleys, like, oh, this boy, he would be great one day. I don't know why I'm talking like Ian McKellen. Okay, so now
close enough.
Close enough, yeah. And again, then we have more dated CGI with the, or should I say, lighting effects with the scar on Harry Potter's head. And
that was probably one of the more notable effects in the movie. That was a little bit outdated and not quite as good as I would have hoped.
All right, and then we've got of course we flash forward to Harry when he's 11, I believe.
Yes, 11 years old,
11
or
years
just
old.
turning 11.
Yeah, and now he lives a shitty life, man. He
does.
His foster parents or whatever they are, they're dicks to him. The little kid is just a little shit. He's always banging on. They got him living under the staircase, and the little kid's just like bouncing up and down on the staircase, and his life is just hell at this point.
Yeah, and of course this is all stuff that we could put together when we were young and watching this, but now as we're older and watching it, we both noticed just how surprisingly good the acting is from the Dursley family. Like the father and mother, they both have such great comedic timing, and they have this way of, despite being complete assholes, you kind of buy it. Which is a feat, really, because the idea of anybody being able to treat a child like that they are currently living with, it's incredible to think that that's something you could put on screen and have it actually be believable, but they manage it surprisingly well.
Oh yeah. And then you got the father or whatever, he's the mustache twirling type, like and then you've got the high-pitched screaming wife, just like completely babying her child.
And something I'm noticing now is they're both very stereotypical, just British stereotypes, of course. But then their son, I feel like, is almost more of an American child stereotype.
I agree.
With how materialistic and just the way that, of course, I'm not especially familiar with how British children are. However, it's pretty reminiscent of how I would expect a spoiled American child to act, which
I've met many kids that act just like him, and it's kind of sad, but
it's very sad.
All right, and then we've got more tomfoolery with the family, and we've got Harry and the family going to the zoo, and he's talking to the snake, and then the snake ends up getting out of his environment somehow, and da 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 da. The snake talks. It's very cheesy.
Yeah, that was another quite outdated CG effect, but
Uh-huh.
I would say it's pretty decent for the times. Even today, CG animals, totally CG animals, even today are not the greatest thing to look at.
Yeah.
But I would say it still doesn't hold up great compared to what we have today, but it's not horrible.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's definitely passable.
Oh yeah. And then after that, we've got a bunch of letters coming in from Hogwarts School of Wizardry, and then it's letter after letter, and we get a hint of the father being aware of how, I guess, special Harry is.
Mm-hmm. And it's weird because he never directly says anything about it, except he says no funny business, but at the same time you mentioned he talks about how he doesn't believe in magic later.
Yeah.
So
I thought that was so odd. And then after, of course, the film unveils itself to where the family is actually related to Harry's dead parents. It really kind of wove in their like, I guess, motivations for being assholes.
yeah, kind of.
Because you have the wife who is the sister of Harry's mom, and she's always been jealous because her sister was picked to go to Hogwarts. Was it? Yeah, she goes to Hogwarts as well, and the mom is just so like upset about it, and then after I saw that and I saw her give, it was a little bit exposition dumpy, but
Bit, yeah, when Hagrid comes in and they're having to explain a lot in a little small amount of time, a
Yeah.
lot of things that set up backstory that isn't particularly important now, but will kind of matter a lot more in the coming sequels. But I feel like we said, it was a little dumpy, but
yeah,
it needed to be there.
it did.
Yeah, and I feel like they didn't really do too much with the exposition there that wasn't strictly important to what needed to be said there.
Right. And I'm glad that they included that and didn't just, oh, Harry's life is crappy and his family is crappy just because they need to be crappy and we need to relate to him and all that.
Yeah.
It gives you more reason to want to root for this kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, then we have the letters like flooding the house, and I love that. I love
Yeah, the special effects on that were
it was very
pretty good, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how much of that was special effects, how much of that was practical effects.
That's what I'm wondering too.
because it looked pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, it still looks really good as far as the way that they're flying, and there's so many of them, and
Absolutely.
yet it looks pretty seamless.
Mhm.
It makes me think it might be some sort of practical effect, but I don't know how they would go about doing it.
I know, and I feel like I want to believe that part of it is practical because that'd be cool as shit.
Mhm.
But like it, I don't know. There's just some things you can't do practically within the time frame that you have. But
No.
anywho, so now we have the family moving far away from their house into a freaking lighthouse in wherever they are. It's out in the middle of the
Yeah.
ocean,
Mhm.
and
And that's when we get Harry's birthday.
Mhm.
That's
get-
when he turns 11. And it's he's drawing in the ground, and then he makes his wish at midnight, and immediately the door gets kicked down by, of course, Hagrid,
of course, Hagrid.
he's great. He really is.
Hagrid is, I want to say, best character in the movie.
I probably wouldn't fight you on that if you wanted to say that. I think there could be definitely a strong case for that. Yeah.
Of course, once we get to Alan Rickman,
Of course,
that's where the real debate begins. So then we've got Hagrid coming in and being all like,
You're a wizard, Harry.
Wizard Harry. And he's all like, I'm a what?
So then we get all the exposition there about his family and that sort of thing, and how he didn't know he was a wizard, and they were keeping it from him because they don't like that sort of thing. They think, because there's a line from the mother of the Dursleys, who is the sister of Harry's mother, and she specifically says that everyone was all enthralled by her magical abilities, her sister's magical abilities, but she was the one who saw her, as she says, as a freak, which was all that she ever really saw it as.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like, I'm not sure whether the keeping him from magic was more of a trying to actively oppress him, or whether it was more of a we don't want you to be like those freaks, we want you to have a normal life kind of thing. I feel like it makes a possible case for it being a much more I guess good-willed sort of thing. They don't go about it in the best way.
No, not at all. And that's what makes me think personally that it's more of an oppressive thing, and it's more of like more malicious and more of an envious type of thing. But obviously, we don't really find that out. But I mean, again, that's one of the great things about this movie is that you can take character motivations and just have your own, I guess, what is it? Your own take on it, your own opinion. Be like, hey, I think it was because of this, or no, it was because of this, and you can both fight about it, but not fight about it.
Yeah, and we'll get to see more of the family throughout the other movies as well, which will help to inform that a little bit, because they aren't in most of this movie. They're, in fact, after this scene when Harry goes off with Hagrid, that's the last time we see them in this movie.
Oh yeah.
So that's what happens next. Hagrid takes Harry, and he takes him to. He says he needs to take him to get stuff for school, and he has no idea where the hell he's going to get all that shit because it's wizard stuff, and they're in London. So they go through this. I think it was a pub. I believe it was a pub.
Yeah, a pub.
And basically they go through and they talk to some people in there. Specifically, most importantly, Professor Quirrell.
Yes.
He specifically is the one that is there that they meet in the pub, and we meet him, and he's very clearly a bit of
eccentric.
He's very eccentric. He seems terrified of everything. He has the very pronounced stutter, and I think, I mean, we'll talk more about it later, but I think the way that he's portrayed is so conducive to the sort of storytelling they're trying to do.
Oh yeah.
With it's really a very, very good representation of how expectations should be subverted in a movie, because we can talk about The Last Jedi another time, but I would say this movie does that sort of thing very well.
Yeah,
because throughout the movie, I mean, if I didn't know, I really would not ever suspect him. And I think that's really a testament to both the actor as well as the way that things are cut together and that sort of thing. I think all of that really works very well towards that goal.
Oh yeah.
So we meet him, and then they go through a brick wall in the back into Diagon Alley.
A Diagon Alley. Yeah.
Now, I would say that the brick wall effect when it was moving, it was pretty good.
Really good, yeah.
It was pseudo like Transformers, like with all the moving parts and all of that. And I mean, as shitty as Transformers movies are, they've got some pretty good special effects.
Pretty good effects. I just wish they would stop overusing the wah, 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 wah sound effect. Like is that supposed to be appealing? I don't know. We're not talking about Transformers. We're talking about Harry Potter. And so after we get all this stuff, we get his uniform, we get his wand, and his pet owl named Hedwig. Then we have more exposition about a certain individual who shall not be named.
Voldemort.
Why would you name him? But anyway, I mean, yeah, that's... How do you feel about the whole exposition behind that?
Okay, I think the way that people react to his name and the way that they're all very particular about calling him he who must be named, he who must not be named, I think it has a lot of potential to be really just dumb. I think it has a lot of potential to not work, but I feel like all of the genuine reactions that these people give throughout this movie as well as the other movies, I feel like they really kind of make it real. They make it feel like you really can't say his name. And when people do, I mean, it's just a name, obviously, but when people do say it later on down the line in other movies, specific people, you kind of feel like, okay, cool, yeah, they mean business. They actually said his name, which you wouldn't really get if they were kind of nonchalant about it. And also, to be fair, it's kind of a dumb name, Voldemort. I feel like he who must not be named almost inspires more fear than Voldemort would.
Dumb name, dumb nose. And then I mean, personally, I'm kind of getting around to the whole thing, but when I watched it as a kid, of course, I was terrified. I was like, oh my god, the visuals of this film and the Voldemort scenes that we get are sweet. Like I'm like in awe of how they handle the creepy moments and how they shoot it. It's just so well done. And the sound effects as well during those scenes is just the score. Oh my god, it's so creepy.
And I would say, especially in that vein, I think one of the biggest strong suits of this movie, at least this one specifically, is the subtlety of it. There's so much subtlety in this movie.
Yeah.
Both dramatic as well as comedic, and it's the sort of thing you don't really get a lot of today, because people are trying to beat you over the head with jokes, or they're trying to be so overbearingly dramatic, but everything here is, almost all the moments are so subtle, and they work so well. Like, all of the jokes that probably shouldn't work, but they just do.
I love the scene when they go to the bank to get Harry's money, and they meet the goblins, and the goblins are so cute. The practical effects in this scene are also wonderful.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And just they're so cute in the way that they move, and the way that he's asked for Hagrid's lamp. He's like, lamp please, and then he just moves like literally 2 feet and then gives him
hands
the lamp
it back to get the key. Which is, it's so subtle. Like I didn't even notice it until this time we were watching through it, and
oh yeah,
it's just that sort of thing. It was so great. And I think that's another part we need to mention real quick is the bank. Just for the plot's sake, when they go to the bank, they go and they get Harry's money, and then they also go to another vault, which is by orders of Dumbledore, who we only know now at this point as the headmaster of Hogwarts. So it's business from him, and they're meant to go retrieve something from a vault, which the only thing we know or see about it at that point is it's just a big vault with just one thing in it, and Hagrid goes in and takes it and seems very cryptic about it and doesn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much all we get there, but it's important later down the line, of course.
Of course.
So yeah, and then after all that, they end up going to Hogwarts, and well, first they get to the train station, which I think
the most natural. I love just how naturally that Harry and Ron meet each other. It's just so genuine. Like it's not this big thing like, oh hey, oh hi, I'm Ron. What's your name? Well, I'm Harry. I'm Harry
Potter. It's not even them that originally introduce. It's Ron's mother introducing Ron to Harry, or Harry to Ron, or one of those two. And I feel like that's a big thing for Harry, especially because he doesn't have that, and that's the one big thing that separates, I think, Harry's what he sees in the world and what Ron does, is the fact that Harry doesn't have that sort of family unit that Ron does. Yeah. And so to have him introduced to Ron in that way, where it's not even direct, it's through the family.
Oh yeah.
I think that it's another great subtle thing that I don't even know if that one was really intended, but
yeah,
it works very well.
It probably wasn't intended by the director, but it works really well in my eyes, and I just think it's such a wonderful scene.
Yeah. And then we once they go through the wall, we cut to on the train, and we see
probably like one of the best scenes in the whole movie.
It is pretty good. We have them meeting officially for the first time after being introduced to one another. Harry introduces himself, and Ron's face is priceless, knowing the name Harry Potter, but not knowing Harry Potter yet. And then they get some candy off the trolley because Harry is a rich motherfucker.
He's got all kinds of coins.
Yeah. And then we are introduced to our third lead character, Hermione Granger, played by Emma Watson.
Hermione Granger.
And instantly, she's very different from the other two, which I think is important. She's immediately walks in and knows magic already, which is, while Ron has certainly been exposed to it with his whole family being magical. He doesn't show any prowess to it, at least in the beginning. In the first films, Harry has had almost no experience with it at all. And then you have Hermione, who we find out later, I don't think they mention it in this one yet, but she does not have magical parents at all. So she is the only magical one in her family, and yet she has the best control over the magic when they first meet each other, which I think is an interesting thing between the three of them.
I agree. I think it's a lot of like her, again, not growing up from a family with magic, and she kind of has to learn it on her own. Like she's kind of a loner, in that sense. And I don't know, Hermione's just badass.
Yeah, she has a lot of really good lines in this, and I would say there are parts in this movie where I would say that she almost comes across as a caricature of being too smart and knowing too much. And I'll get into more of that later on when we get into the ending scenes of the movie, because I feel like that's where my biggest problems with her kind of come in.
Yeah.
But overall, it's a pretty good introduction to the three of them, and then we move on to Hogwarts itself, which they get to from the train by boat.
That shot will forever be iconic.
It really will. Yeah.
And I mean, I think like because they don't it's odd because they don't use the boats ever again in the future movies. I think they just wanted to use it for this particular scene.
I'd say it was worth it for the visual.
It's so worth it for that visual.
So they get there, they go inside, and they are stopped at the top of the steps by Professor McGonagall, who is I think one of our biggest problems with this movie.
My least favorite character in the movie.
I would say I would agree with that. And we'll get into more of the reasoning for that later, but I think it's one of the things that I noted here when they first reintroduce her after the first scene where she is with Dumbledore and Hagrid dropping Harry off at the Dursleys is you have Harry Potter right in the front of the group and McGonagall right there, and when Hagrid sees Harry, he very much it's very, very clear that he knows who he is, and he's very affectionate towards him, and it's almost as if he has some sort of special connection to him, like almost like he dropped him off at his his family's doorstep when he was a baby.
Really?
But then and then you've got Dumbledore, who not quite as much in this movie, but especially later on down the line, does the same sort of thing. But then you have McGonagall, who I'm not really sure what they were. I don't know if they knew what they were wanting to do with her character at this point.
No, I don't understand. What's her motivation?
That's the biggest problem I think I have with her throughout the film is she has two sort of diametrically opposed sides to her. One is very much a stickler and very much just very this needs to be done this way because this is how it's supposed to be sort of thing. Like when they walk late into class and she reprimands them for that, and she's very curt with them, and she's very just straightforward with it.
Yeah,
and
she takes no shit.
Yeah, exactly. And there's half of her scenes she is exactly like that, and then in the other half she has this completely uncharacteristic to that sort of character side to her where it seems like she does not give a shit about the rules.
Yeah.
Like she could not care less. And I'm not, and it certainly can work. Like you can have a character who has those two diametrically opposed sides to them, but there has to be some sort of middle ground, and there has to be some sort of like tangible transition between the two, because when you switch back and forth like this movie does with her, it kind of just feels lazy. I feel like, and like they didn't know what they wanted to do with her, which is a crying shame when you have Maggie Smith.
Maggie Smith, who is just wonderful, such a good actress.
And I don't really know who would be to blame for this, because I feel like it has to be some sort of problem with the writing, because
definitely
it's just so inconsistent from scene to scene. You never know what you're going to get from her, and it's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, we see her being a dick to Harry and Ron because they're late to class for like 5 minutes. She's like, oh, well, you might want to get a map, to help you find the class, or a watch or something, or why don't you learn a spell to turn one of you into a watch so you can learn when to be on class on time. And it's just like, and then we get another scene in which Harry's riding around on his broomstick. He's flying
when he's not supposed to.
When he's not supposed to be, and then she sees him outside of the window, and she's all like, "Oh, Harry Potter is flying? He's not supposed to be." And then afterwards, he's just like, "But it's okay, because he did well."
Let me make you a deal, she says.
Yeah. Very inconsistent, right?
Yeah, that's. I think that she has got to be our biggest problem, our biggest character gripe with the movie, I would say.
Oh yeah.
So after that we are introduced to Draco Malfoy for the first time,
which is okay, I want to say like biggest at this point he was the biggest kid dick I've ever seen on screen. Like more so than the kid we saw earlier at the very beginning of the movie. And I don't know, I think this is another debate we could get into, is either who is the biggest kid dick. Is it Draco Malfoy or is it King Joffrey? But I mean, that another topic for another time.
And then I feel like one of the things with him is it's very similar. They're both very spoiled. Both he and Dudley are both incredibly spoiled, and from a very young age, and it's very clear that they expect to get everything they want. But it's kind of, there's two sides to that, where Dudley is the whiny version of that, and whereas Draco is very much, I'm going to get this because I deserve this, so I'm going to get this right now, and you're going to let me do so. And I feel like one of them is very much more, Draco is very much more assertive with it, and I feel like that's really what sets the two of them apart, because in many ways they're very similar, and they both kind of take their anger out on people who are not as fortunate as them, I would say. Where Dudley, it's Harry, because Harry is living under the steps, and the very first shot we get of Dudley is him just jumping up and down on top of where Harry is sleeping, because he just can, because he can be a dick, because that's the situation he's in. And then we have Draco, where he treats Ron very much the same way that Dudley treats Harry, where it's the same sort of just, I am above you sort of arrogant, just assholery, but it's done in very different ways, and I feel like they're almost foils to each other, but they're also incredibly similar.
Yeah, I think that, I feel like the whole treatment with Dudley is preparation for Harry for when he meets Draco. And of course Dudley is an asshole, but Dudley is straightforward about being an asshole. Draco Malfoy is an asshole, but he's the kind of asshole that will like stab you in the back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, we see that later on whenever he rats out Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Hagrid, and goes to Professor McGonagall about it. and then we see more inconsistency with her character, but blah blah blah.
Yeah, we'll get back into that.
Get back into that.
So we go into the Great Hall for the first time, and I think we liked the first effect for the Great Hall. The first time we go in, where it's the night sky, and I think it was very well done. It looked pretty realistic.
Yeah.
It still holds up today. And there are other times that we see the Great Hall where we don't quite enjoy it as much, but the first time we see it, I was pretty happy with it.
Yeah, that feast.
The feast looked delicious.
The feast is so good.
So then we go up to the front, and they pull out the Sorting Hat, which I would say one of the most jarring things about it was because it was most certainly a practical thing when they were manipulating it, and then as soon as it got put onto a student's head, it was a very, very clear, obvious change to a CG element, and it went from looking like a real hat, like it should, to looking very, very plasticky almost instantaneously.
Yeah.
And while I do love what they did with it, and I love the way that it moves and the way that it manipulates the folds of the hat to emote, I think that was a great way that they did that, and I think it worked very well. I just think the juxtaposition of it next to itself in the same scene, where it's just, it's very realistic or it's just very not. If it's just very jarring and it doesn't quite work for me.
Yeah, I do. One thing I do like about that, the whole use of those effects, is how they take the creases in the hat and use it as his eyebrows and his mouth. I thought that was pretty clever. But yeah, I mean, it is jarring, not just on an effects stance, but also in just like a narrative sense, because we see the Sorting Hat put different students into their different houses, and it's just like, oh, you'll be in this house, and that's that. And then later on, we finally get to Harry being put into his house, and we see him like whispering to the hat, "Don't put me in Slytherin, please. Don't put me in Slytherin. Anything but Slytherin." And then the hat just basically complies, and it's just like, hey, okay, are you sure you don't want to be in Slytherin? He's just kind of like agreeing with him in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very much how they handle that, where it's you have Harry, who is obviously special because he's the titular character of the movie, and everyone in the movie even knows that he's special because of his scar and the history that he has. And then I feel like it would have played better had they shown any other character also having a similar experience with the hat, because I feel like when you have just only Harry actually getting that sort of interaction, then it seems too coincidental, I would say.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of coincidence in that, and it's just so odd for me, and it definitely stood out. But anywho, so now we're moving on. Harry gets placed into Gryffindor along with Ron and Hermione, and then we get into some more stuff about his parents and his past and all that good stuff. And we get into Hogwarts tomfoolery. We get into
they go to the Transfiguration class with McGonagall, where everyone is in their seats and there's a cat sitting on the desk, and Harry and Ron walk in late, and they're relieved to see that she has not arrived yet. And as they're talking about it, the cat leaps off the desk, and transforms into McGonagall in midair, which I think we were in agreement was a very well done special effect.
Yeah, it was
surprisingly fluid.
It flowed very well, and it was a very good comedic moment.
Especially weird from going from a small quadrupedal animal straight into a human, and it was in the span of like maybe a second.
Yeah.
And it was so quick, but it was so smooth, and it felt like it worked. And I feel like that was one of probably the best special effects in the movie. I would say one of them at least.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And then we have we have him going through that class, and then we have he goes to potions with Professor Snape, played by Alan Rickman,
the legendary Alan Rickman, the late and great Alan Rickman.
What a guy!
Such a shame.
So we have him. We have Alan Rickman doing Severus Snape. And he is teaching potions, and he's going on about how he doesn't expect most people to excel in potions or even care about potions, but for those that can, there's great power in it, and he can teach them to do incredible things with it. So I feel like we already know I feel like we already know before this point. I think they've already said that he would rather teach Defense Against the Dark Arts.
Yeah.
Which I think really plays into this whole idea of both him trying to justify the validity of his potions class, as well as the fact that it really makes you believe when Harry, Ron, and Hermione believe that Snape is the one behind what's going wrong. You actually believe it.
Yeah.
Because it's another subtle little thing. Like, he would rather be doing this, and that's not really something that he gets to do, but it's not exactly the most I would say kosher thing to be teaching. So yeah, it kind of plays into that mystery and that feeling that something's not right with him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then it also what's the word I'm looking for? It'll come back to me. It'll come back to me eventually. But so they're going through that, and Harry is.
Can we just talk about like Alan Rickman and how good he is in this film.
Oh my god.
Like
Every moment he is on screen he steals every single scene.
Every scene. And it's crazy. Just like the way he like slows down his words and enunciates. It's wonderful.
It's like he's like attacking you with every word, even when he's not like trying to be that way. It's just every word that he says is very precise, and it cuts like a fucking knife through everything.
Turn to page 394. Yeah, it's just so good.
And even when he's in scenes with other incredible actors, he just absolutely steals it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is certainly a testament to Alan Rickman himself. But I love that he got to play this titular character, or not. He's not the title character, but this very important character who has such a deep arc throughout the movies.
Yeah.
And you really don't like him in this, which
they
is
do a good
great.
job of making you hate him.
Yeah, and you really do believe that he is the problem and that he must be the problem because that's what you would what they're trying to make you think, and it's just everything he does makes him seem that way. And then to eventually in 6 movies have that reveal that no, he's really the good guy.
Yeah.
He really is. And it's just and I love that because it's not, despite them making it out to seem like a darker class to be teaching, it's defense against the dark arts is the class that he wants to teach. It's not dark arts. He wants to teach how to fight against it, which it seems dark because of what the subject matter is, but it's really a good thing, which is really just him.
Yeah.
That's very much his character, which I don't know if it was intentional again, but it works.
It
so well.
Works. It works. I just he rides a line of being so menacing, but also being very cartoony in the way he speaks and the way he moves. He's just so sudden about his movements, and he's just like,
yeah,
I must be going, and it's just like, oh, it's just wonderful.
It's fantastic to watch, and I enjoy every performance that I get to see him in.
Oh yeah.
And then we move on to a scene.
We move on to a attempted scene.
It was the next class that they go to is it's outdoors, and it is a broom flying class, which I don't believe we ever see again anything about it. We never really see how important brooms are to wizards because we both get teleportation spells later on, as well as we never see them use brooms for anything other than Quidditch, which is a game.
I feel like it's simply just for the game, and I don't know. I feel like the whole Quidditch scene is just like really a lot of the stuff that happens in the movie is just to set up all of the wonderful wizarding world of Harry Potter. And you know all the cool shit that's in it, like, oh look, we got like potions, we got like alchemy, we got blah, blah, blah,
yeah.
blah,
I feel like other than Quidditch, the brooms almost feel they're out of they almost feel obligatory. They feel like, oh, we are magic, and some of us are called witches, so we have to have broomsticks, obviously. And it just feels kind of contrived, and it doesn't feel like it needs to be there.
No.
And while I do enjoy the Quidditch scenes, we can talk about this first scene. But
get it out of the way.
Yeah, we'll talk about that one in a moment here. But when they actually play Quidditch, I enjoy that. And I think that they do a fantastic job with it and making it interesting and explaining the game and making you actually care about it. And it plays a decent role throughout most of the movies even.
Yeah.
However, you have this scene where it seems like it's supposed to be this integral part to being a wizard, knowing how to fly your broom and learning how to do that, and it just doesn't come across as something that would work that way in this world that they set up.
I mean, does it help out the plot? No,
Not really.
I think it's simply just for comedic effect and all this stuff. And
I think maybe they were trying to show off special effects with this scene.
Oh.
Which would be kind of disappointing because this is probably this is the worst special effects in the entire movie.
Yeah.
Which is it's sad specifically because they do it right later.
Yeah.
During the Quidditch
They do it much
match,
better.
Yeah, they do it during the Quidditch match. There are more people flying around at higher speeds, doing more things, and yet it looks more real than when it's just Harry just flying around by himself. And I don't know why that is.
I don't know. I don't either.
It just the CG in this scene, I don't know if it was good for the time. I feel like
it was just lazy because
it seems like it, which I hate to say because it might have been pretty decent for that time, and I'm sure it took incredible amounts of work to make it even where it was when we got to watch it, but it just doesn't work.
I feel like maybe part of like why the special. Okay, so we'll get into specifics right now of the scene. So what we see is Neville Longbottom, who is God, I have so much love for that kid. But then we see him flying off in his broom, and he can't control it, and it's supposed to be funny, like oh ho ho ho. And then we see him flying around and crashing into things, and he crashes into one of the towers, and he falls off the broom, and
even the fall just looked it looked
so
like a Saturday
bad.
Morning cartoon.
It does,
and I don't know. It seems like it should be simpler than that, but it didn't look.
It could have
right.
I feel like it could have easily been more practical.
Yeah,
but
it was a distance shot. I'm pretty sure when he fell.
Yeah,
like he falls onto a statue, and then his cloak rips, and he falls down to another statue.
Yep.
Which, looking at the angles of it, doesn't look like it would have made any sense anyway. But even from just from a filmmaking perspective, it didn't look good, and it didn't need to happen. He could have just fallen off the first one and landed on the ground, but it just looked wrong. It didn't look like it fit into the world.
No, it's very disappointing. And again, going back to what I was saying earlier, I feel like maybe part of that scene is like the reason why the CG was so bad is so that they could put more money into the CG in more important scenes, such as I guess the Quidditch scene.
Yeah, because it looks so much better in that. And I don't know what the disparity is between those two scenes. I really, I don't know. We'll get more into the Quidditch scene when we get there. But yeah, so that scene, we have Neville being taken away.
Yeah.
And it's seen that
breaking his arm,
and just kind of, I think it was his wrist, wasn't it? Yeah, he broke his wrist, and he's not. He doesn't look like he's in pain.
No,
and they just treat it like a
broken wrist.
Exactly. Right, they just treat it like a minor inconvenience, which, to be fair, we see later in other movies, it really is kind of just an inconvenience. They can just fix it.
Yeah.
But it would still hurt.
Oh yeah, like you would still think, well, damn, like it's a broken wrist.
He fell probably 3 or 4 stories and broke his wrist.
He fell a pretty good height.
But so we see that. So he has something set up in a previous scene called a Remembrall, which is an orb with smoke in it that turns red when you've forgotten something. Mm-hmm. So we see that after he's fallen and been taken away, Draco has taken this from him without him knowing it, and he expresses plans to take it and put it somewhere where he has to search for it and basically just to hide it from him, just to fuck with Neville. And so he expresses plans to do that, and Harry fights him on it and is, you shouldn't do this, this isn't right. And then he, and this is all while being told that they're not to leave the ground. So, of course, being Draco Malfoy takes off on his broom and is like, yeah, if you want it, you're going to come catch me for it. So, being Harry Potter, he does. Yeah. And, so he goes after him, and it gets thrown, and he goes after it, and he catches it right in front of McGonagall's window, like we were talking about before. So everyone's all excited for him. He caught it, he saved the thing, and he saved the day, basically. As small as the thing he did was, he saved the day.
Yeah.
So he's coming down, and he touches down, and you see McGonagall obviously knows that he was not supposed to be flying his broom at that moment. Like, you can see that on her face, obviously. And yet, when she sees him, she gets up, and then the next time we see her is in the next scene. She's coming down into the field, running out to talk to Harry Potter, and you think, based on what her characterization has been so far, that she's going to be pissed off at him because he wasn't supposed to do that. He was specifically told not to, and even though he did something right, he wasn't supposed to do that right there. So you would expect her to be cross with him, to be upset, and to punish him in some way. But instead, what happens is she takes him to meet the captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, because seeing his prowess with the broom, she's decided that the way to go about this is to just let him play Quidditch.
Yeah, like, I guess she saw potential in him.
Which, I mean, it's fair enough, but at the same time, her character that they've set up to this point, it comes out of nowhere.
It's so inconsistent. You're just
Exactly.
like, why are you letting this kid who obviously broke the rules just get a pass and put him on a Quidditch team while he's a freshman with a bunch of, higher level Hogwarts students?
And I think the biggest problem with it is it would make sense if they wanted to have her be favoritive towards Harry, because they have Dumbledore be favoritive towards Harry, they have Hagrid be favoritive towards Harry, because they were there to when he was a baby. They were there, they took him to the Dursleys, and yet McGonagall was there, and there are moments in this movie where she very clearly shows favoritism to Harry. But then, unlike Hagrid and Dumbledore, there are moments in this where she almost seems to specifically target Harry negatively. And and even if she doesn't specifically negatively target him, she doesn't seem to give a shit who he is. Which, again, you can make that choice. You can have her not care. But if she doesn't care, then you can't also have the moments where she all of a sudden does for no particular reason that you can tell.
Yeah, other than just to move the plot along, I guess.
Yeah, and that was my biggest problem with the performance from McGonagall, was she was turned into almost more of a plot point and a plot device than an actual character, which you can't do to Maggie Smith.
No, you don't do that to Maggie Smith. You don't do her like that.
Yeah, and it was just, I feel like we don't have to talk about her too much more. I don't think there's too much more that we have until the getting caught by Draco thing. We'll talk about her a little bit more there, but we'll try and keep off of her.
That'll be the end of it.
Yeah, it just doesn't work. That's basically the long and short of it. Pretty much anything with McGonagall feels off in this movie. And from what I remember, I think they remedy that going forward, at least a little bit. But in this first one, it seemed like they had no idea what they wanted to do with her.
Yeah, for sure. All right, and so where
all right, and then we have them being led to their dormitories, and we see, or not being led to, we saw them being led to them earlier. We see Ron, Harry, and Hermione walking through, and they get caught on a staircase that is moving, which
staircases, man.
I like them in concept. I think they are completely useless. There's no practical reason for that. Or do they move in like segmented time and they move between positions? Because that could be useful. It'd be essentially an elevator at that point, except you just have to walk up the steps. But they seem to move completely randomly, and even when the three of them are on it and it starts moving, they seem taken aback, like, well, I don't know where we're going, and they end up where they're not supposed to be.
Yeah, and I'm like, the staircases took you there.
Exactly, and it's just it just doesn't need to be there. And I understand that it's in the book, and it doesn't really make any sense in the book either, though.
They're so
just
dangerous.
As a concept, the whole thing of the stairs that change position, it just doesn't work.
They're so dangerous too. Like there was, I believe it was the scene in which they are stepping onto the staircase and they're taking to Fluffy, the three-headed Cerberus dog, and part of the staircase just kind of like just opens up, and I'm just like, well, what if one of those students were to trip and fall and then die?
Yeah, because it's just like endless staircases up and down that entire like corridor there. And yeah, what you're talking about with the staircase moving, that's the scene here where they're taken to the door that they aren't supposed to be on, which is the third floor,
Yeah.
which they hadn't told us before, but apparently they aren't supposed to be on the third floor.
Apparently
so
they're not supposed to be there.
we get that, and so nonetheless they go in the door, which I thought was a little bit strange, and they're looking around, and we get Filch's cat, Filch, who is the groundskeeper of the school, and
Yeah.
something I gotta say I love about Filch is the fact that even the film itself, even the cinematography, everything about it makes him so inconsequential, because even it makes his cat more of a character than him, because it's never that they're afraid of Filch, it's that they're afraid of the cat, because the cat is going to like rat them out to Filch. Filch is just kind of there walking around. He doesn't really seem to give much of a shit.
No.
And they make that very clear. Like, even the first time we see him, they don't mention the cat, but they cut to him, and then it immediately starts panning down, and he gets panned out of the shot to see the cat. And I think that was intentional. I think they were trying to make him even less important than he already would be.
Yeah.
And I just find that fantastic. I think that was very just subtle and clever, like a
Subtle
lot
humor.
of things in this movie.
This movie has so much good, subtle humor, and I'm glad that a lot of it is not like beaten over your head. It's natural, you know. It's something that you chuckle at, or you just flat out laugh out loud at. It's really good.
Yeah, exactly. So after that, they go in, and they do get found by Filch, but they manage to unlock a door. Hermione knows the spell to unlock the door, so they go through the door, and they're hiding there. And then we get one of the most gratuitous reactions of anything that I've ever seen, where the camera pans around them, and we see they've locked themselves in a room with a giant 3-headed dog. Now, I think the CG on the dog was pretty good.
Yeah, the CG
The
on
dog
the dog was
looked pretty decent.
good.
Yeah, I don't think I really had any problems with the way that he was portrayed.
Yeah.
The problem, though, every time he's on screen is that despite setting the dog up as being a guard dog and something that is, and it even shows itself to be very aggressive, whenever they are in the vicinity of it, it's always a slow pan, and it's like a very slow take.
Yeah.
Like they very slowly realize that they're being stared at by this dog, and then it waits for them to react before it. And I think it was meant to be comedy, and it was one of the only parts of the comedy that I felt like didn't work, and it was of course the least subtle of all the comedy in the movie.
Yeah.
And I think when you set up such brilliant subtle comedy throughout, and then you have something like that's just this big, I think it's supposed to be a big gag, and it just doesn't work. Like, it cuts to them screaming, and then you see the dog, and then it attacks.
Yeah, it's brought up twice in the film,
Yeah,
and both times you're just like, all right, that was okay.
Yeah, and it's done the same way both times too.
Yeah.
And the only
exact
part,
same way.
and the only part that I actually like as far as the editing of those scenes is there. I believe in both scenes, but definitely in the first one, there's a moment where you have the 3 kids screaming, and then it cuts to the dog, and the heads are in the exact same position between the group of the 3 kids and the 3 heads of the dog, which I thought was kind of cool, just from a filmmaking perspective. But
I did like that too. It was kind of like a whole David and Goliath type of scenario, except with 3 kids and a 3-headed dog.
Yeah, and it was like a mirror, because the 3 kids each had their positions that were corresponding to the heads, and they were staring at each other. And I liked the way they did that, and I wish they had stuck more to stuff like that rather than just banking on the kids screaming and then dog attacking, sort of weird way that they decided to do that.
Yeah, and so
they run out of there, and I think pretty much I don't think there's a whole lot more before the Halloween feast, which is another great thing with the Great Hall that we liked, was the pumpkin, the jack-o'-lanterns floating throughout. I think those looked pretty good. They looked pretty decent.
That shot was very well done, and
this is the ceiling of the Great Hall once again.
Yeah, and there are a couple scenes I mean, I feel like it's a coin toss with the Great Hall scenes, because there's one scene in which there were a bunch of owls flying in, bringing in letters from family members, and it was half like practical and half CG, and I'm just like, why
it
wasn't...
just didn't work.
No,
it was a weird mix, and when you put practical things next to CG things, the CG ones are always going to look bad.
Yeah.
At least back in this time.
Practical always looks good. Always.
So we have the Halloween feast. So they're all enjoying themselves. And then we have Professor Quirrell running in, yelling, "Troll in the dungeon."
Troll in the dungeon.
Thought you ought to know. And then just passing out cold on the floor, which was
funny moment.
Fantastic. I think I pretty much love everything that character does in this movie. I think all of his moments are just so... They're just so good.
Yeah.
And I very much enjoyed his character. But so he passes out. He's yelling about there being a troll in the dungeon. All the kids run to move and Dumbledore calls them off, has the people try and get the kids all back to their common rooms, just peacefully and orderly. And then we have Harry and Ron, who are following the Gryffindor group, and then they realize that Hermione is not with them, because a scene we forgot to talk about, there was a scene with a levitation spell with
right.
where they're trying to levitate a feather in class, and it's not a very long scene. There's some good parts in it, and I think overall,
I love the kid that, like, I love the consistency with that one kid where he's just trying his best, man,
and everything he does just blows
everything
up. Everything blows up.
Everything blows up. It's just so that's another thing about this film. It does, okay, with the exception of the three-headed dog joke. All the other jokes that are brought up again are done very well. Like,
and there are some that are brought up several times. There's that one with the explosions, and then there's the other notable one being Hagrid, which we will get into. But and there are some that are recurring jokes, which they end up working pretty well, and that's one of them with the explosions, and it just works really well, and it's consistently funny every time they do it.
Yeah.
And so we have the levitation scene, and Ron is failing to do it, and Hermione's having an easy time. She's explaining to him how to do it, and he's not taking kindly to it. And after class, we see them walking out, and Hermione is behind them, and Ron is talking very openly about Hermione just kind of being a know-it-all sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And she gets upset and walks away. So everyone is aware of the three of them and the audience that she is not happy. So we have her. She's notably not in the dining room for the Halloween feast, and then that's what they realize when she's not with them while they're going back. So they go looking for her, and they find her, of course, in the dungeon, because that's where the troll is. So that must be where the main characters are headed.
Not in the bathroom. In the dungeon.
Yeah. So they're in the bathroom in the dungeons. And I don't think I like the troll.
Yeah, I don't like the troll. I think the scene overall is very half and half. Again, it's just kind of...
There are some good moments there. There are... I feel like that's a little bit of where the friendship kind of starts to take over, rather than the bickering between Ron and Hermione. I feel like that's kind of where they get a little bit more, because... the long story short is the troll is destroying things. He's putting Hermione in danger, and Ron ends up being the one to disable the troll by picking up by using the levitation spell to pick up the troll's club and then drop it on his head.
Yeah, it's just all like, cool.
And then we get a very gratuitous troll fall, which I wasn't a huge fan of.
No,
but
the troll CG it's very just... It's whatever. It's passable.
It wasn't like actively disappointing, but it was okay.
It's okay.
So then we have after the troll, Hermione ends up taking the blame for the three of them being down there, and basically says that they saved her life and that sort of thing. So they get off the hook for that, because I think they lose points for being out of place, and then they gain house points for
taken from Gryffindor. And then it's like, but 5 points added.
Yeah, exactly. So it's pretty inconsequential, but it helps with the relationships between Hermione and Ron specifically, I would say.
Yeah.
And then we have oh yes, very notably. So we have the professors who come in afterward, and Snape is one of them, and he has a gash on his leg that Harry notices, and Snape sees him notice, and then he very quickly covers it up.
Yeah, and you're just left going like,
what? Yes, they assume that he is the one who let the troll in, and he was trying to get past the dog that they had seen previously, and that's how he got injured, was the dog must have gotten to him while he was trying to get past him. Because they think that whatever's in that vault, that he's the one trying to get it, because they assume that he is the antagonist, because that's kind of how he's set up and characterized, and it works again really well. I think the way that they play him, it just, you believe it, and I love that, and it just works super well, and then we have what comes after that? I think after that we have
I believe right after that it's just more tomfoolery, and then we've got like the whole Happy Christmas part.
Oh yeah, so we have Hermione going home for Christmas, Ron and Harry staying. We have some wizard chess, which ends up being important later, but we're just shown that Ron is pretty good at wizard chess, so he's going through that. And then
this is nice foreshadowing for for later on in the film.
And then we have Christmas morning, which I loved the scene, because it's very, very similar to the very first time that we see Harry at this age, which is him being yelled at to wake up on the morning that we meet him when he's under the stairs. And it's very, very similar this time when Ron is yelling for him to get up and come downstairs because it's Christmas and they're gonna have their day or whatever, and he just wants him to get up. And it's very similar, but it's so different because you can see the change in Harry's demeanor between the two, because you have him being just so dejected and so just distraught in his situation before, and then you have his new, I guess you would say, his new family, basically Ron, who's doing the same sort of thing, but it's very, you see a transition where Harry feels his mood very much changes. He's very happy, he's very friendly and comfortable with the people that he's with. And and that leads into Harry opening a gift, which I believe this actually is the only plot thread that I can think of that did not get wrapped up. He opens a gift, and it is an anonymous gift from somebody, and it is an invisibility cloak, which
the invisibility cloak.
Oh yes, the invisibility cloak. So we are not told who this present is from. It comes with a note saying that his father had it, and that it should probably go to him now. And they go through and they get into some antics with the cloak, because before Hermione had left, they were talking about they had talked to Hagrid about how they think that Snape was the one who was trying to get past the dog, which they weren't supposed to know about, and we have some funny moments with Hagrid there.
Oh, I should not have told you that.
I should not have told you that. So we have that moment where they're talking to Hagrid about it, and he says that whatever the dog is guarding is between Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel. So they're trying to research Nicholas Flamel because they don't know who that is. And basically, when they get this invisibility cloak, Harry uses it to try and go into the restricted section of the library to try and research him.
Get some good shots with the invisibility cloak.
Yeah, and something we noted was the when you are seeing from the outside you're seeing it from the outside, it looks kind of cheesy. It's a lot of floating head syndrome. It just looks like a green screen. Yeah, exactly. And it looks like a green screen because it pretty much is just a green screen. And then you see from inside the cloak, and everything has this this sort of it has like this sort of translucent feel to it, and
Yeah.
it has a very nice visual style.
Yeah, I love the first person invisibility cloak scene. It's just it's wonderful. Like it's kind of like iconic.
Yeah.
I want to say.
It's really nice. It works very, very well. So then we have him going through the restricted section by himself, and we have yet again Filch's not Filch's cat this time. Notably, it was he opens a book which starts screaming because it's magic, of
jump
course.
Scare. Yeah.
And then we have we've got Filch, who he comes running because they aren't supposed to be in the restricted section. So he ends up hiding from he's hiding from Filch, and then he ends up, I believe this is when he ends up in a room with a giant mirror.
Yeah, and that's I guess that's the mirror in which it like predicts the future, but lets you know what the future will entail.
Well, it's not so much the future. It's the mirror shows you what you desire most.
Oh, that's right. That's
yeah,
right.
and they think that it might be something with the future, and then they end up realizing it's not because Harry is seeing his family.
Yeah, right. Ron sees the mirror and he's just like, "Oh, I'm a Quidditch master," and he's just like, "Does it predict the future?"
Yeah, exactly. So we have that sort of thing going on there, and then we've got him. He finds this mirror and he sits there with it night after night after night, and it's kind of it's sort of he sits there alone a lot of the time, and one of the nights Dumbledore shows up, and this is there's a moment where he's talking to Dumbledore, and this is one of the few scenes you get between the two of them in this movie, and it's very much it's very solemn, and I love the idea of the mirror, where it's great to see what you want, and he has a line Dumbledore does about how many great men have sat staring in the mirror and just wasting their lives away. And
yeah.
It was just a great sort of scene between the two of them.
Oh yeah, and then later on, I can't remember exactly when, but it was just like we end up finding out about the Philosopher's Stone, and then it's just like...
Yeah, we find out Hermione, when she comes back, she realizes that they didn't need to search in this restricted section. She has a book that talks about him, and it mentions the Philosopher's Stone. Mm-hmm. And I can't quite remember. I think we've skipped over Quidditch at some point.
We did skip over Quidditch.
And I'm not 100% sure where exactly that fit in.
Quidditch was... I believe Quidditch was like right before the invisibility cloak segment, like before the Christmas part.
I think it's between the troll and the Christmas.
Yes.
So the Quidditch, I thought, was good. I think the CG was a whole lot better there, and I loved the way that, despite it being it's kind of a complex and very fast-paced, weird game that the audience doesn't know really anything about, but the way that they do it, they have such a good explanation of what's going on while it's happening that you don't feel like you don't know what's going on. Like you get the sense that, okay, this is supposed to be happening here, and this guy's supposed to be doing that, and you get a lay of what Quidditch is about, which it's not the biggest, most important thing in the series, but it does play a role in at least most of the movies, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I mean, it becomes a pastime. You know, people are like, they get hyped over Quidditch, which is cool.
And the most notable thing about the Quidditch match is during it, Harry's broom starts not working correctly, and he gets almost thrown off of it and almost hurt that way. And during that whole exchange, or that his trying to grapple with his broom, Ron and Hermione look across and see Snape moving his mouth, seemingly casting some sort of curse on Harry or the broom.
Yep.
It looks as if he's manipulating the broom in some way. And again, this was very well done, because obviously it's not Snape, but the audience really believes it is, because despite Quirrell, who is the actual antagonist, being in the background of the shot of Snape moving his mouth, doing the same thing. You're so focused on Snape. And
Yeah.
I think that's both because Alan Rickman is a fantastic actor and he steals, again, every scene he's in.
Yeah,
but at the same time,
yeah.
you expect him to be doing something wrong because they've set him up that way. And then, so Hermione sneaks over and she casts some sort of spell to set his robes on fire, which just so happens to knock him out of his concentration as well as Quirrell, because Quirrell is right behind him.
Right.
So, again, it gives the illusion that it was Snape doing it. So then we have... it's after that they're talking to Hagrid, and they say that they know about the Sorcerer's Stone, and that it was Nicholas Flamel, and they're sort of how they suspect Snape and that sort of thing. And he says, no, Snape's one of the ones protecting it, that sort of thing. So that's kind of important there. And then we get we have a scene where Hagrid, they go see Hagrid, and he's in his like, I guess his
little hut.
Yeah, which is on the grounds of the school. And we have him. He lets them in reluctantly because they know about the Sorcerer's Stone. They tell him that at the door, and he lets them in. And then they're kind of talking about it, and he's hatching a dragon egg because he's Hagrid. And of course, he's hatching a dragon egg, which he names Norbert, which I love. I love that.
I love Norbert. Hope he's doing well in Romania.
Hopefully, yeah. So basically, as they're getting more exposition of what's going on with how there's things guarding the vault other than just the dog, they also find out that the way to keep the dog happy is through music. I think they actually find that out slightly later, but they get a bunch of more exposition about the dog and about how he came to have it and how he came to have the dragon egg.
Yeah, and I believe that's how they find out about the dog being soothed by music and falling asleep, because then after that, Hagrid is just like, oh, again, I should not have told you that.
Which, it works so well. And I think it's very much due to the actor himself, because he's so good.
Robbie Coltrane.
Absolutely.
So good.
And so then we have Draco Malfoy, who shows up in the window, who he is overhearing and seeing what he shouldn't be, which is them
being a little shit.
Yeah. Which is Ron, Harry, and Hermione being out of bed, out of their common area where they're supposed to be. So he goes and he gets Professor McGonagall. Mm-hmm. Oh, one more thing we forgot about her. She buys Harry a broom.
Oh yeah.
Which
was it for Christmas, or was it?
No, it was right before the Quidditch game, and he never gets mail. Harry never gets mail because he doesn't have anybody to send him mail. And then right before the Quidditch game, a Nimbus 2000, which is set up earlier as the premier broom at the time, it just gets dropped on him, and he opens it up and he looks around, and McGonagall is there smiling at him. And again, it's so inconsistent. And I want to talk about it more, but we won't because we've talked about it too much.
We've done it too much. It's like beating a dead horse at this point.
But it's just more inconsistency. And then we have we flash forward back to the scene where we have Malfoy, who is going to McGonagall to try and get them in trouble for not being where they're supposed to be. And McGonagall does punish them for that, but she also does have she also punishes Draco as well, because he was also not where he was supposed to be, which I did like. I don't really like her character in this movie, but
that was a more better note to end off of, was punishing him as well, because at that point I just would have been like, wow, you're irredeemable, man.
And this is pretty much the last scene with her in the movie. We won't have to worry about her too much anymore. So they all end up having to go with Hagrid into the forest behind the school. So we find out that there have been unicorns that have been injured or killed in the forest, that Hagrid's trying to figure out who or why, and we find out that unicorn blood, if you kill a unicorn, if you drink a unicorn's blood, you can live forever or longer, or one of those two.
I believe it is you become immortal.
But if you kill a unicorn, then you live a half-life, I believe is how he describes it.
Yes.
So we get that exposition, they split up, and we have this great scene where Ron, Draco, and Hagrid's dog are walking through, and they come across this very wraith-like creature who is over the corpse of a unicorn.
Ooh.
And is
Before that, though, before we even see the wraith, we see it, but it's he's just kind of moving through the woods, and it's done, and that's probably my favorite scene in the whole film, because that's
the epitome of subtlety.
That's
in
when
this movie.
it made me poop my pants as a kid.
It was so good, and it's in the background. They're just talking, and you just see this little flicker of just something moving behind Harry.
Yeah, no sound.
They don't draw any attention to it at all. It's not even like it's not centered. It's not something where that would be the focus of the scene. It's up in the top left corner while they're doing other things. And it is so subtle, and it's so effective in what it's trying to do. And
gave me chills.
It's so well done, and I was so happy with that. But so we find this creature huddled over the corpse of a unicorn and supposedly drinking the blood of this unicorn. And then we have, I believe, Draco and the dog both end up running away, and it's left with Harry, who is he feels pain in his scar when he's with the creature, and basically the creature starts moving towards him, and he has a moment where it looks as if the creature is going to be attacking him, and then we have one of the another less than stellar CG
Centaur Machina.
Centaur Ex Machina.
Centaur Ex Machina.
Yeah, he's the centaur doesn't look good.
No, the CG in that
and
scene, was...
especially when it's juxtaposed against the very well done wraith creature.
Yeah.
I think seeing those two together, the centaur just looks wrong. He just looks very, very plasticky and very much like he doesn't belong in the environment, which, to be fair, he's not there for very long. He's not in the scene for very long. I do believe he says something along the lines of the fact that it's likely... I think he alludes to it being Voldemort who is trying to kill the unicorns.
Yes.
And so we have that sort of set up, and then we have them going back to
the forbidden third floor, and they're going to attempt to soothe Fluffy, the three-headed dog, but they end up finding that there's already a harp in place, and it's already playing music to soothe the dog. And
although we have skipped again one of our characters that we do enjoy in this movie.
Yes. Oh no, we cannot leave this out.
So they're planning to sneak out after hours, which they've already been put in trouble for, and of course as they're leaving, they see Trevor, which is Neville's toad, who is sitting out in the common room, and of course behind him is Neville, and as they're trying to leave, Neville stands up to them and tries to stop them, and it's a very valiant attempt, and he immediately gets just petrified, physically petrified, and is dropped by Hermione's spell, and
Poor
just
Neville.
has to lay there.
He brought his fist up and everything.
He was I'll fight you, and she just, sorry about this, and just kind of and makes him fall over and just paralyzes him there, and there's nothing he can do about it, but it's just such a good little scene.
Yeah, it's very, very good comedic moment.
So they're going to try and break into the vault because they're under the impression that Snape is making a move to try and take it tonight. So they're trying to get to it before he can. So they go to see Fluffy, and they're ready with they're going to try and do music to soothe Fluffy, and they get in there, and there's already a harp playing magically, like you said, and so they realize that whoever is going after it, they believe it to be Snape, has already done this and is already ahead of them. So they end up they move the dog's paw, and they're about to go down into the cellar, and then we get another moment with the dog that is not stellar, but
it's all right.
It's just the dog waking up and noticing them after the music stops, and almost getting them, but of course it's not going to get them because we're not going to maul children by dog in this movie.
Yeah.
So they go down, and they find themselves in a pit of vines, and this is kind of where my gripes with the last few scenes of this movie begin.
Yeah.
So these basically this cellar is designed to keep people from being able to get to what we know as the audience to be the Sorcerer's Stone, which is going to be contained within. So essentially, this is the professors of the school's best defense against somebody getting through all of this. Now, the first thing is they fall into vines, which start wrapping around them and pulling them down, and we find out it's somewhat like quicksand, where if you struggle, it kind of drags you down faster.
Yep.
But if you relax, then you can get through it. So Harry and Hermione both do. Ron cannot, and they end up casting a spell to make some sunlight come up because Hermione paid attention in botany and knows that that specific plant does not like sunlight. So they cause that, and they end up getting through that. And
She took a page from the kid that likes to blow shit up.
yeah, very much. And it just feels so weak, that first trial. And I get that I guess technically it's the second trial after the dog.
Yeah.
But as you'll see as we go through, they just don't make sense as things that would actually make sense to guard something this important. And because these three first-year students managed to get through every single challenge that is supposed to be deterring like the most formidable things that would want to get to this Sorcerer's Stone. But as we move on, we get to a room with a broomstick and with a bunch of keys that are flying around, and they very quickly locate which key they're supposed to be getting to get through the locked door in front of them.
Yeah.
And there's a broomstick there, and Harry, of course, gets on the broomstick and has to go catch the key, which, I mean, the CG in it wasn't bad.
Yeah,
it was an enclosed space that he was flying in, which didn't do him any favors. Overall, it just seemed very coincidental that was the trial there, because realistically, we see more powerful spells going through this series. Anybody would have just been able to get that key. Like, it's not even that you have to so much as use the broom. Even I feel like when you actually know what you're doing, and he manages to do it, but I feel like pretty much anybody could have. It doesn't really work as defense for something.
Yeah, I mean, overall, the games, or not the games, God,
the trials.
They're not games at all. The trials are more, they're 50-50.
I feel like they're just they're too coincidental, all of them, because you have the one where it's Hermione, she did her studying, she knows how to beat it, and then you have the second one, which is Harry can fly a broom, so he can do this one, that's cool. And then you get to the third one, which is another one I have a problem with, which is Wizard's Chess, which it's a giant chessboard, and there's a moment when they walk into the key room that they think it's too simple. They say out loud, it's too simple, there has to be something else to it. And of course there is. The keys start flying around like crazy once he gets on the broom, which doesn't deter him, but at the same time it was too simple. But then they go into the chess room, and they don't say, this is too simple, as they're trying to walk past the chessboard and the pawns get ready to kill them.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't, it's just inconsistent a little bit. And it's very rare for anybody in this movie, other than McGonagall, to be inconsistent like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have this life-size chessboard where they're taking the places of these pieces, and they're trying to play chess against the opposing side to win a pass through.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, just putting aside the fact that this again doesn't really deter people, and you also have the fact that there are 3 pieces missing, which was seemed again very what's the word I'm looking for? Very coincidental that there were 3 pieces missing and the 3 of them there. But we also know that whoever came before did not have 3 people, so I don't know if the room is smart enough to know how many people it needs to have pieces missing for, and if it does, then why can't it just know this is somebody we don't want getting past, let's just not let them go. It's just all very convoluted and coincidental, and I feel like it hurts the ending of the film. I feel like up until this point, the things seem to fall into place how they should be, and pretty much all the things that they have to go through make sense for the world that they're in. But I feel like these moments here, they just don't work for me.
Yeah, I agree. So then after all that, we get to the big reveal, which is that Professor Quirrell is actually behind all this shit.
Mm-hmm.
He's behind all the tomfoolery going on with Harry Potter during the Quidditch scene,
And this is Harry Potter by himself, because during the chess match, Ron sacrifices himself, quote unquote, gets his horse hit and apparently screams despite not ever getting touched. But I digress. So Hermione takes him back up to the infirmary. So Harry goes in alone, and we find Professor Quirrell, and he's standing in front of the same mirror that we had seen before. Now, he sees, and when he gets to the mirror, he can see himself holding the stone, which is what he wants most at that moment.
Yeah.
So it's the same mirror that we had seen, and we understand how it works, so we understand why that is what he's seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we hear a voice telling Quirrell to use the boy Harry to get the stone, and yeah.
I do love this reveal, though. I think it's very creepy.
I think this whole scene, everything after the chess, I think it works fantastically.
Yeah.
I think it all works very, very well. You have the reveal of Quirrell, and then you have Harry, who goes and he stands in front of the mirror, only to have the stone appear in his pocket. Now, I don't believe that Quirrell knows this yet. He's asking him what he sees, thinking that he's going to be able to figure out how to get it through that. And long story short, the face that we are unaware of on the back of his head decides he would like to talk to Harry.
Yeah, he's just like, hey, if you give me the stone, I'll give you your parents. And Harry's just like, nah.
Yeah, so he unwraps his head, and there's a face growing out of the back of his head who doesn't necessarily look like Voldemort,
Not yet.
but it's the spirit of Voldemort, I guess, is what it is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so they have this moment where he's trying to get Harry to kind of give them the stone and help them. And he says he'll give him his parents. They'll find a way to get his parents back, and that sort of thing. And Harry, of course, isn't going to do that because he's the protagonist. He's Harry Potter. So essentially, they have. I wouldn't really call it a fight scene.
It's simply just Quirrell running up to him, being like,
and trying to grab it, and he drops the stone, and then Quirrell starts to strangle Harry, and Harry puts his hand over Quirrell's hand, and his hand starts burning, and it kind of falls away and just disintegrates.
Yeah.
Which I thought was done well. I think the special effect looked good on that.
Good.
And then we have Harry going up and grabbing his face, which causes the rest of his body to disintegrate as well.
Yep.
So I thought that was as well done very, very well, and I think it was very pretty gruesome for the tone that the movie had set. It wasn't bloody or anything, but I think the way that it was done in a very dark way.
Yeah,
and
brutal.
Yeah, I liked the way that they managed to do that. So then we have Harry, who the spirit of Voldemort rises up and comes through him and then disappears.
Yep.
And he passes out and wakes up in the infirmary. So we have...
And then we get Dumbledore
coming in, who... he's not in this movie enough.
No.
He does a very, very fine job in the scenes that he's in. He very much captures the feel of Dumbledore.
Oh, yeah.
But he's not in it enough. But this is one of the scenes we get with him where he's coming in and he's talking to Harry, and he has a great line about how what he did... what happened between he and Quirrell in the cellar was it was secret, so he said naturally everyone knows about it. So he jokes around with Harry, and he tells him that the Sorcerer's Stone has been destroyed, that's what they decided was best for that, and that's for the most part that's pretty much it. They have another meeting in the Great Hall after that, where it's shown that they have a house cup, which is essentially the different houses, members of the different houses earn teams for the house, and they are essentially just competing to see who can. It's basically the good noodle stars from SpongeBob, and if you get the more of them by the end of the year, then you win. And
Draco the whole time just like, I'm a good noodle.
So we find out that Gryffindor is in last place, followed by Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin on top.
Yeah.
So
happy ending.
Sounds about right, because based on the events of the movie, they've been losing a lot of points in Gryffindor. But then we have a scene where Dumbledore is giving out extra points to Ron, Harry, Hermione, and Neville for the things that they did that night, which is kind of an asshole way to do that to Slytherin, because that was one thing about Slytherin in this, that I am a Slytherin, and I resent that they make them all out to be these like stereotypical like super villains,
right? Because they're not. They're smart dudes.
And they try and play it off as like this justified triumphant moment where the rightful protagonist house of Gryffindor gets to win despite not having actually won, and it seems kind of like a dick move. Just to me. I don't know if it came across that way to you, but it just seemed kind of like, why?
I'm a Hufflepuff. I see the good in everything, so like
fair enough.
But I mean, I think the ending is good overall because it wraps everything up very nicely.
Yeah, I would say it does a very good job of wrapping up all the plot threads and making a very complete story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we have Harry going back home afterward. At the end, he's saying that he's not actually going home, because implying that his home is now Hogwarts, which is a good moment. Yeah. So,
wait, that's it?
That's pretty much it as far as
no post-credit scene.
Was there one? I don't remember.
No, I'm just.
I was gonna say, if there was, I totally forgot it existed.
I'm just kind of like integrating that into the world.
Fair enough.
World of cinema in which everything has to have a post-credit scene.
Yeah, you see, that's the funny thing, is this was in 2001, yet I believed you. So
cool.
So yeah, so that is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I would say, overall, I very much enjoyed this movie.
Enjoyable movie.
I thought it had a lot of charm, and it had a lot of very subtle humor that, despite having seen this before, of course, I didn't remember it being this charming, and I didn't expect to enjoy it quite as much as I did this time.
Yeah, neither did I. I mean, I did find a lot of things about the movie in which I didn't like, but I mean, overall, the things that I like and things I love for sure outweigh the things that I didn't like.
Yeah. I think this is a very good starting point for the series, and I think when you start with actors that are so young and you allow them to evolve on stage or on film throughout a very long process and a very long story like we have here, this is just the beginning of it, and this is already so well done. And I feel like the fact that we have 7 more movies after this to continue to explore the characterization and just the way that these characters grow and interact with each other, I think that it's a really good start to this universe.
Really good starting point. Yeah, I'm excited, dude. I'm excited to see Chamber of Secrets. I remember like watching Sorcerer's Stone and then Chamber of Secrets, and then comparing the two movies. I'm like, oh shit, things get dark.
Yeah. And as far as some standouts, I would say acting. Obviously Alan Rickman was fantastic.
Yeah.
Dumbledore.
Richard Harris
was great. Hagrid was fantastic.
Yeah.
I think for child actors, the 3 of them really did very well.
They really held up.
And there were a few moments, of course, where I wasn't super thrilled with some of the choices they made, but overall, they acted like
kids, yeah.
Which is something they couldn't really get if they didn't actually take that gamble and they didn't cast kids in that first movie, knowing that there was potential to lock themselves into these kids for 8 years, and they did it, and it really paid off. As far as special effects, we had some really good ones. We had the ones with the Wraith. We had
We had the Quidditch
The
scene.
Quidditch scene was pretty good. We had aspects of the Sorting Hat that we really, really liked, that sort of thing. And we had some that were not the best. We had the snake, the scar,
We had some that were atrocious.
Yeah, the first broom scene was, again, not the greatest. I was really taken aback by the sound design, not even just the music, but some of the miscellaneous sound effects and that sort of thing. I think the sound design in general and the way that it frames this movie and every scene in it, I think was great. I think
Well done.
Yeah. And we also noticed a lot of really, really good cinematography in this movie.
Good.
Like, even just in the beginning scenes with the Dursleys, it's nothing interesting all that really much is happening.
Yeah.
But you have these dynamic angles and these very good, like, these just shots that just they aren't conventional and they just work.
Yeah.
They just work really, really well. And
you buy it because it's in this world that they're building. And I think the cinematography and the shots that they have in this film, it works very well with like the just the world that they're establishing. Like, for example, the invisibility cloak scene, the Quidditch scene, like a lot of good cinematography in there. The initial first shot of Hogwarts was just mesmerizing.
Yeah, there's a reason that so much of this movie is so iconic, and I think a lot of it has to do with that cinematography.
Oh yeah.
And finally, I just want to say that the actor behind Professor Quirrell was fantastic.
Yeah.
I think he did a very good job, and I actually bought even just his very quick transition between his just weak stuttering eccentric professor and just this evil mastermind.
Oh yeah.
And it worked for me, and I didn't know if I expected it to or not.
Yeah, for sure. I think the most underrated actor in the movie, or underrated character.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was very well done. And of course, somebody who we did skip over as well that I forgot about, Ollivander, John Hurt.
Oh yes.
It was so good. His scene. It's a very short scene, but it has so much subtlety and so much comedy, and it's just great.
It's
and
so
I love
charming.
That. Yeah.
Such a charming scene.
All right, and that is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Ah man, I'm so excited to catch up on Chamber of Secrets. I'm excited to explore this whole franchise again.
Yeah,
it's gonna
absolutely.
be wonderful.
Yeah, so I guess probably our next podcast will be Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
Yeah, we'll be back next week.
Yeah, and hopefully next week. We'll see how that goes.
See how it goes.
And if you guys have any specific movies that you'd like to see us talk about, or films that you think we might enjoy, let us know down below. Yeah. And I guess we'll see you guys later.
Yeah. Adios.